Hey there everybody, Sage Popham here, founder of the School of Evolutionary Herbalism. And a lot of people in our community, really reach out a lot and are just kind of a little bit more curious about me and like my story and a little bit about kind of my own personal life and things like that. And, been talking about vitalism a lot lately and the vitalist herbal traditions. And when I think about my own life and my own journey on the plant path, and I really think about like what were some of the big turning points for me, I would say this concept of vitalism has truly transformed my life, like not just as an herbalist, but really as a human. And so I thought I would do this post here talking a little bit about 5 ways that vitalism transformed my life, and really speaking more to how the concepts and principles of vitalism really led me to a deeper understanding of myself. And I think that is a really, really valuable thing, right? That to have self-knowledge. And to me, knowledge of the self is something that actually directly translates to our own health and well-being. And the more that we understand ourselves, our bodies, our minds, our hearts, why things happen to us, why things go the way they go, learning from life, I think these are some of the qualities that really lead to becoming a great herbalist, becoming a really great healer, because then we're able to help people on their own journey of self-discovery, self-mastery, and knowing how to live a healthier life. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about this, and just going to jump right into the first one. And I would say one of the biggest ways that vitalism really transformed my life was really just understanding my own body on a deeper level. I can remember when I was studying at university and going through, all the kind of hard sciences of learning about the human body and thinking about anatomy and physiology and biochemistry and pathophysiology and all these like really going into the body and how it works and the different cell types and how the physiological processes happen in our body, and just loving it and being totally fascinated by it. But there always felt like something missing from it for me. And it wasn't until I really got into looking at the vitalist traditions, whether that be, Greek Galenic medicine or Unani Tib or Ayurveda or Chinese medicine or different approaches in North American herbalism, and really seeing that, yes, we all have a liver, yes, we all have lungs and a heart, and like we all have the same anatomical parts of our body for the most part, right? Of course, there's variances in some, but really going into the specifics of this and looking at it not through the lens of just science but looking at it that we all have, yes, we all have hearts and lungs and livers and kidneys, but that we, on top of that, we also have, like, some people have really strong lungs. Some people have weaker lungs. Some people have really healthy, vital livers. Other people are a little more prone to having problems in their liver. And so what I like to think of here with this first point is that vitalism gives you a unique understanding of your body, right? Not just the human body on like a general level, but your unique body. And we typically refer to this as your constitution, right? And looking at everyone is put together in their own unique way. And in that unique way that we are assembled and created, that there comes along with that certain strengths and weaknesses. So some of us have, like I said, certain really strong livers and maybe weaker kidneys, or some people, like, what's your weak spot? We all have a weak spot physiologically where we tend to get sick. Well, why is it that some people, if we were all put together exactly the same, well, why is it that some people when they have issues, health issues, it affects their digestion. Whereas other people, it's their nervous system. Whereas other people, it's their lungs, or other people, it's their immune system. This is really what the Constitution does for our understanding of our bodies, is gives us insight into what our predispositions for both health and disease are. And what that has allowed me to do personally is really see like, oh, like these are the parts of the body that are a little bit weaker. And that translates into, well, here's things that I can do about it in order to strengthen those parts of the body. Here's, lifestyle things that I can do to, prevent those things from happening. And just making those fine-tune adjustments to ultimately prevent yourself, or myself in this case, I guess, or all of us, from getting sick. And I think that's one of the powers of herbal medicine and holistic approaches to healing, is that we don't have to just use herbs when we're sick. Of course, there's certain herbs that you really only use when you're sick, but there's other types of remedies that you can do and work with that you can use to just maintain constitutional balance. You can strengthen your weak organ systems. You can maybe temper down those excesses so that you can come into a better place of balance. And so that was one of the big things for me with Vitalism, and how it really transformed my life, is just understanding my body. And I think this is a really useful thing for all of us to understand. I mean, we don't, for some reason, when we come into this world, we don't get, there's no manual. There's no manual of the human body. And to me, I think it's almost like, I feel like constitutional understandings, this should be almost like part of our education of hey, here's how to know why your body and your temperament, right? Because this all translates to, emotional and psychological dynamics. So why do some people tend to be more stubborn emotionally, and other people tend to be more angry, and another third type of person tends to be more anxious? Oh, this is all part of those constitutional and temperamental predispositions. And knowledge of that is so powerful for you, just for yourself, but also certainly if you're wanting to be working with clients. Lends a lot of insight into the people you're working with, what remedies to give them, what remedies not to give them, what to watch out for, and ultimately empowers you to serve your community better. So that's the first one. The second one that was totally huge for me was how nature affects our health. It's so easy for us to think that, maybe, all of our health problems are genetic, or all of our health problems are because of, it's just shit happens and that's just what, but Vitalism really teaches us that we are nature, our bodies are nature, that the nature outside of us affects and influences the nature inside of us, and that indeed nature can directly trigger certain symptomatic patterns, certain diseases, certain those constitutional imbalances that we might have. Sometimes nature can tilt the scales in such a way that it can, produce a symptom or produce a problem. And, this was something that I really realized spending time in the Southwest and being there in, I'm from the Northwest where it's very damp all the time, and going down to the Southwest and spending, a pretty decent amount of time in Arizona and New Mexico and things like that, and really noticing certain things within my own health changing, being in a really hot and a really dry environment. That became super apparent too in our little stint in living in Southern Oregon, which technically is still the Northwest, but it gets really, really hot down there. And I tend to, constitutionally speaking, have a little bit more of a Pitta, fiery Mars constitution. And being in that hot environment was just not good for me. The summers were really intense, and I found myself irritable, really, really irritable, just not being able to escape from that heat. And a lot of health stuff started coming up that I had never experienced before. And I realized it was the ecosystem that I lived in. It was the season that I was in. It was the weather. And so to me, looking at those three dynamics, your habitat, your ecosystem, dynamics around weather, and just seasonal dynamics. This is huge because there's a lot of symptoms out there that can be directly triggered by the environment. A lot of folks sometimes with arthritic joint pain that can flare up when the weather gets really cold and really damp. People with like hot livers, getting them in hot weather, and it can really flare that stuff up. So there's a dynamic here with vitalism of having a perception, a level of awareness of how the outside affects the inside. And then through vitalism, you have tools, which I'm actually going to talk about in a future post, about kind of daily rhythms and practices and like things that you can do, very simple things that you can do to live in accordance with the vital force, with the vital force of your body and with the vital force within nature, the intelligence of nature. So this dynamic of how nature influences our health was, for me, like totally revolutionary. It was something that I guess I had intuited, like I had felt that, but there wasn't really like, it had never been explained to me, or it had never been like, oh, this is like a principle of a tradition. And sometimes it's nice to get those confirmations, So that was a really big one for me. And I think this is key for us to understand and take into consideration as herbalists when we're working with people. It can be so easy to just focus in the body and like, okay, what's wrong in the body? But sometimes we forget to look outside of that and like how are our environmental factors a possible causative factor here in within that person's health. Third huge one, revolutionary one with vitalism for me was how to use herbs holistically. And I know that sounds super like vague, but it was a really key thing for me as an herbalist to incorporate an energetic understanding of the plants, meaning hot, cold, wet, dry, and getting much more specific in terms of how I administered remedies to people and how I took herbs myself. Before coming to vitalism as a concept and studying vitalist traditions, my approach to herbs was honestly like a lot of people's approach to herbs probably out there, which is, oh, these herbs are good for these symptoms. Like these herbs are cough herbs, and these are urinary tract infection herbs, and these are herbs that you use to calm yourself down, and these are the herbs for gas and bloating. And that was kind of it. And it was like, I loved it. It was interesting. I was learning a lot about the plants. But again, it was like, it always felt like something was missing. Like, okay, someone's got, they can't sleep at night. Well, there's all these herbs that are good for insomnia. How do you pick which one's going to be the best for that person? Is it just pick any old herb and it'll work? That was the way I thought. It was like, oh, well, here's the herbs for that. And I'd give it to people and it didn't always work. Or I'd take an herb for something I was struggling with and I was like, it didn't work. And it would really affect my confidence where I was like, well, there were times where I can remember feeling like, oh, is herbal medicine even real? Like, does it actually work? And then I realized it was like, no, there's a deeper level of specificity that we can get at with what herbs that we choose for a client or for ourselves. And to me, there is this dynamic of the energetics of the plants that was huge. It was like the key missing piece for me of like realizing like, oh, no wonder valerian is not a good herb for me, right? I'm a hot, fiery constitution and valerian's a pretty warm plant. And I never knew why. I was like, why does valerian not work? Everyone says it's this great sleep herb, and it just never really worked that great for me. And I realized, oh, because it's actually not really indicated for my constitution and kind of that fiery nature that I have. And so this dynamic of using herbs holistically, the energetics was a really big piece. The other piece was really looking at how herbal medicine is different from suppressive forms of medicine. And it's like, we typically think of that as like allopathic, like just trying to take the symptom away, which we can also do with herbs. Allopathy doesn't just mean, using drugs or over-the-counter medications or something. It's really an approach. And with the Vitalist approach, it's really looking at how do we use herbs that follow the vital force. And it's really simple, actually, taking digestive bitters before eating a meal. You're following the vital force, because at that time, your digestive system should be secreting the vitality, and the intelligence of the body should be secreting all of your enzymes and bile and getting everything ready. That's why it's nice to cook your own food, because while you're cooking and preparing, it's like your body is starting, it's getting time to eat soon. Taking nervous system remedies at the evening when the vital force should be kind of winding down and everything should be calming down and kind of transitioning to that parasympathetic, like time to rest and time to go to sleep. Even taking nervines at night is following the vital force. Taking diaphoretics with a fever that helps stimulate circulation and bring the blood flow to the surface. Totally Vitalist approach. Using expectorants during a cough that help your cough be more productive, rather than taking like an antitussive that suppresses the cough. So there's a way of the Vitalist approach is like you're looking at what is the body trying to do? What is the vital intelligence of the body already trying to do? And how do we use herbs to support that response? Revolutionary for me. This was a huge concept that makes so much sense of, rather than view, because it's a perceptual shift of seeing symptoms as an enemy to seeing symptoms as a language. The symptom is not the enemy. The symptom is an intelligent response of your body trying to autocorrect, and sometimes it does a really good job, and sometimes it gets a little too far in one direction or another, and it needs a little bit of help. And that's where our herbal medicine is very, very powerful. Now, there are certainly times that we maybe, need to suppress a little bit, right? I mean, if someone's getting to like a dangerously high fever that could damage their brain or something, then yeah, sometimes there is a place for allopathic approaches. There is a place for suppressing things sometimes, but a lot of the time, following the vital force is actually a better choice. So non-suppression versus suppression, the energetics of the herbs, and really how to follow that intelligent response of the body was really, really, really powerful mindset shift for me. And I feel like that's one of the cool things about Vitalist models of herbal medicine, is that a lot of them are kind of like perceptual shifts, a way of changing the way you see things and seeing the greater picture, the greater pattern, seeing the nature within things, asking why. I think that's one of the most important questions that we can ask ourselves, especially when you're working with people. Like, why does this person have this symptom? What's going on here? Don't just take it at the surface. Oh, they got a cough. Here's a cough remedy. It's like, well, why do they have the cough? What kind of cough is it? What's going on here? What's triggering that cough? What's behind the symptom? What is the body trying to tell this person right now that, not all of us are really amazing at listening to our own bodies. That's why we go to healers and doctors and herbalists, to people that can help translate those messages and give us remedies to move things along. So this third one was really big one for me. Fourth ways that Vitalism transformed my life is the importance of food and digestion as ultimately the foundations of our health. This is a concept that we really see pop up time and time again over so many different cultures and traditions of medicine around the world, is really the importance of food. And, I love, there's that saying, you are what you eat. And I had a teacher at Bastyr that said, it's not that you are what you eat, it's that you are what you can actually assimilate into your body. It's you are what you like absorb. And that translates to the importance of digestion, because you can eat the most amazing, organic, nutrient-dense diet in the entire world, and if you can't absorb any of the nutrition in it, it's like, it's not going to really be that beneficial. Of course, it's good to eat healthy, but it's also good to have good digestion so that you can get all the goodness out of that food. So for me, like I think when I was 18 and first moved out, I was I turned into a vegetarian and ended up becoming a vegan, and I was vegan for a very long time, and then I kind of went over to like what in my opinion now is kind of an extremist diet, and I was actually a raw foodist for probably about a year and a half, 2 years. I was strict, like 100% raw food. Raw food vegan. So I did not eat anything warm for almost 2 years, which living in Northwest Washington is hard. It's like, oh, it's January and it's snowing and I'm drinking a smoothie of berries and like superfoods and all this stuff. And I've gone through a lot of different kind of dietary stuff. Like for me, food was always like a thing of like a discipline for me, really. And after going, vegetarian, vegan, raw vegan, and then kind of coming full circle and becoming carnivorous, and I started eating cooked food again, and then I ended up eating, coming back into eating meat again, and the feeling, the way that I felt in all these different kind of dietary approaches was like really, really informative for me in terms of how I feel in my body, how I function, the way my mind is, the way my emotions are. And it was like huge to really get into then vitalism and see how they say, your gut is the root of your health. It is the root of the vital tree. And the food that you eat is like the soil that those roots are in, and how it's very difficult for us to have vibrancy and vital health if our digestion is compromised and if we're not eating well. And so this was a really huge thing, because for me personally, because it helped me understand that first part that I was talking about constitutionally. As I come to understand my own constitution and my own nature on a deeper level, and then looking at the foods that I was eating and the state of my digestive health, it was like, oh, like these are the kinds of foods that I should be eating, and these are the kind of foods that I shouldn't be eating. And, I tend to have like a Pitta Vata constitution. So like really fiery and driven like a Pitta, but the Vata-ness, like I tend to get really dry, and I get kind of, back in the day, I used to be like really ungrounded and spaced out, especially when I was raw. Like looking back, when I was a raw food, it's like my feet were not touching the ground. Like I was so ungrounded, and it imbalanced the Vata part of my constitution to actually, a really unhealthy state. I was really underweight. I was having a lot of digestive problems, eating cold food, dry, everything's dehydrated when you're raw. And it was just like, wow, this is not good for me. And as I corrected my diet, I felt so much better. And I think that's really good for all of us to, again, this is about self-mastery, and not that there's a peak of the mountain that you'll ever reach. Like we're always going to be learning about ourselves. We're always changing and growing and coming to understand ourselves on deeper levels. But I think a part of that really is like, it doesn't really have to be a big spiritual thing. It's just paying attention to how you feel when you eat certain things and what types of things are good for your unique body, and I don't think it really is all about, well, I follow this, dietary protocol or that one, and this one's better than that one. And I just feel like there's, is it paleo? Is it keto? Is it raw? Is it vegan? Is it macrobiotic? Is it like, how many different dietary systems are out there. And I think, maybe some of them are good for some people, but some of them aren't good for others. And I think taking that uniqueness into account is really important. So there's that part of it, but then there's also as an herbalist, right? It's like that was super informative for me to realize, oh, the holistic herbalist has to be at least a decent nutritionist. Like we have to be able to look at a client's diet and food and digestion so that we can assess it and help them navigate that territory, help them find out, what is a good, solid diet for that person to be eating that makes them feel good physically and emotionally. Because let's face it, emotions are super tied into food. And I have gotten a lot looser over the years. I used to be very militant and very disciplined. And I realized that also was kind of unhealthy because it cut out a lot of enjoyment of food where it was like, oh, I really want that, but I can't because it doesn't fit into this little box that I've placed around myself. And I also want to enjoy my life and enjoy the foods that I like to eat. And if that means that every once in a while I'm going to eat a super cheesy enchilada, like great, that makes me feel happy inside my heart. And sure, maybe it's not the healthiest thing in the world. And I think it's all about finding balance. Like, yeah, I'm not going to eat super cheesy enchiladas like every day. But every once in a while, I want to enjoy that because I want to enjoy my life. And so I think there's something about the dynamics around food and digestion and the way the vitalist traditions really see that as a critical part of our health and a really critical part of our work as herbalists is huge. So if you do consider yourself an herbalist, I would encourage you to make food and diet and digestion a part of your work with your people because, we live in a very interesting time in regards to food. And I think helping people with that, it's very confusing for a lot of people. And it's very scary for a lot of people, not knowing like what to eat anymore. And so being able to support people in that way is really, really helpful. The last one that I want to share of how Vitalism really transformed my life personally and as an herbalist is really kind of looking at the bigger picture. And I guess it would be kind of more spiritual in nature, which is really looking at just the overarching harmony and intelligence of nature and how profound that is. Like, how profound is it that, that a simple change in the weather can affect the flow of your blood and can affect the way the energy in your body is moving in good ways or not so comfortable ways. How amazing is it that, there's this intelligence in your body that has the ability to inform you when something is out of place. Like, I just feel like there's a dynamic with Vitalism as a mode of perception, a way of seeing the interconnectedness of life and of nature that is to me, it's truly profound. And this really comes back to the old alchemical concept of the macrocosm and the microcosm, right? That everything in the outside world, everything in nature exists within us, that we have the fire lives within us, that the water is within us, that the air is within us, that the earth is within us, that the celestial bodies are within us, and we're connected to that. And I think that is just truly profound. And it's one of those things that I think sometimes we can intuit or we can, or maybe we read about it, but to feel it and to experience it is truly profound. And I think this kind of going to the plants too, that there's a vital intelligence in that plant, that there's that plant, there's a life within it. It's not just a plant, It's so easy for us as humans to look at the plant kingdom and maybe to just think it's, it's inert or it's not smart because it can't move around and it can't talk, or, we maybe overlook them. And the vitalist perspective, we see that plant is alive, that plant is intelligent, that plant is sentient, it's conscious. I mean, even science has proven this, right? Through the way that they study plants. And not that we need science to prove it, but it does validify, can you say that? It validates what traditional people all across the world have said, which is that that plants can communicate to us, that the plants are intelligent and sentient, that there is a spirit within that plant, and that we as humans have the ability to communicate to that plant. Not just, expressing ourselves to the plant, but that we have the capacity to receive also the communications from that plant within our own heart. And I think, to me, this is one of the most profound aspects of being an herbalist, is to feel our connectedness to nature, to feel our connectedness to the plant, and to receive a communication from a plant, to feel that is, to me, it's like one of the biggest blessings of being an herbalist, aside from giving someone a remedy and having it heal them. It is that feeling of being in relationship with nature, that you're never alone in that way, right? That you don't have to be lonely, because you're a part of nature and nature is a part of you. And we just have to open up our minds and open up our senses and open up our hearts to not just see it, but to feel that interconnectedness. It's happening with every single breath that we take. To me, that is a direct sign of our utter reliance on the plant kingdom for our lives. But also it just shows that every breath we breathe in is that plant's exhalation. And every exhalation that we make is breathed in by the plants. And just think about that for a little bit. That is so profound. And it's something that a lot of us take for granted. And so for me, this was a huge transformation in my life, because I had always sensed that there is something in nature that is intelligent and sentient, and that I wanted to feel connected to it, and to see that, first off, I wasn't crazy, and that people all around the world have been connecting to nature in this way, and that indeed there is a vital intelligence in the natural world that we can communicate with. Wow. I think this is one of the biggest things that is missing in our modern culture. I think this is why depression is such a huge thing. I think there's a lot of reasons for depression, but I think a big one is like people are lonely. People feel isolated. They feel like an island, and they don't feel that connection to the natural world, which it's really hard to do when you live in the middle of a big city and you're in traffic all day, and our modern world is not exactly very well integrated with the natural ecosystem. But I do feel that this connection to nature is so important for all human beings, but especially for the herbalist. That's our role, is to be a bridge between the world and the earth, to unite the plant and the human kingdoms. To me, that is, in a way, the ecological function of the herbalist, is to unite those worlds together. So I just thought I would share a little bit about the vitalist tradition, and how, some of the ways that it's really been profound in changing my life, and hopefully in sharing that it can inspire you to understand a little bit more about how vitalism can transform your life as a person, but also as an herbalist. And this is why I firmly believe that the modern paradigm of herbal medicine has to be integrative, that we have to be able to look at traditions of medicine and traditions of herbalism, and we have to look at the modern world and, even modern science and modern approaches to things, and bring them together so we can have a fuller understanding. And I just think if we just abandon our past and abandon thousands of years of tradition, then, you know, what are we standing upon, you know? I love that Paul Bergner always says, well, if you're going to reinvent the wheel, it's probably going to be round. And I always love that quote. And I think the vitalist traditions of herbal medicine have a lot to offer us. And I think they're very valid in studying and learning from, and more importantly, experiencing. And I think that's one of the biggest things with what vitalism is that it is not just, it's not just about reading a book about vitalism. It's not about studying Ayurveda or Chinese medicine or Thompsonianism or Galenic medicine or whatever vitalist tradition you might be called to. The most important part of it is that it is a way of perceiving the world around you. And it is a holistic way of perceiving the world around you. And I think that is what is needed in this world. So thank you so much for joining me in this video. I really appreciate your support of the channel, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to the podcast or checking it out on our blog. Give it a like, give it a thumbs up, subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. It does really help our School of Evolutionary Herbalism to be able to provide more free content to the world. So thanks so much for joining me in this session. And until the next one, take care and be well.